We continue now at the top of Daf Lamed Hey Amid Beis in Meseches Bava Metzia. This is Bava Metzia Daf 35b. The Gemara continues to discuss when property is repossessed for a creditor. Let's say somebody owes money, he hasn't paid off the debt, so then they take away his property. So Agbe Ihu Bechovo. Let's say the person on his own, he allows his property to be collected because of the debt that he owes, meaning the person doesn't actually take him to court, and it's not the court that's repossessing the property and giving it to the creditor. It's actually the person who is in debt. It's actually the borrower who is allowing the creditor to take the property. So in that situation, the question is, what if the person who is in debt eventually gets money and wants to pay it off and wants to get his property back? Pligi bar Ravacha v'Ravina. That's a machlokas between Ravacha and Ravina. Chad Amar Hadra, one says the property does go back to the debtor. V'chad Amar Lo Hadra, and the other one says it does not go back. Mando Amar Lo Hadra, the one who says it does not go back, Savar Haizvini Ma'al Yahi. He holds that this is really like a full sale. Essentially what the person is saying, I owe you money, and therefore since I owe you money, because you lent me money, so I owe you money, instead of paying you back money, I'm going to give you my property. It's essentially as though he is selling him the property. The money I took is the money I'm taking for the sale of the property, and therefore, because it was willingly that the debtor gave the property over to the lender, to the creditor, and so therefore he's not able to get it back, just like any other sale. If you sell your property, you can't get it back. Uman Damar Hadra, but the one who says that the property does return to the person who was in debt, Savar Lo Zvinim Alyu, he holds this is not a real sale. The only reason why he willingly gave up the property instead of letting it go through the court process, that's just because he was ashamed, he was embarrassed, he didn't want his property to be repossessed by the court, so he'd rather do it willingly, but it's essentially the same thing as if the court had taken possession of the property, and therefore he is able to get the property back if he pays off the debt. Rashi explains, Agbe ihu bechovo le'el mahader gabe shum. We're going back to these cases of evaluation where we evaluate the property of the debtor. Kolomer means to say, im lo shamu abezin l'malval karcho shalova. Let's say the court did not evaluate the property to the lender against the will of the borrower. V'kam le me'atzmo, he allowed it on his own. V'lo hitrichu l'din, he didn't make him take him to court. V'yamar lo tol karkas bechovach, he said, take this land for the debt which I owe you. So again, the question is, can he get back that property or not? That's a machlokas amoroim. And the Gemara continues, from what point in time is the creditor allowed to get the fruits of the property? In other words, the court has decided that this property goes to the lender, he's allowed to take possession. From what moment is he allowed to get the fruits of that property? That's a machlokas amoraim. Rabba Amar Rabba says, when the shtar of repossession, authorization gets to his hands, once he takes that shtar, he is now the owner of the property, he can have the fruits of the property. Abaya Amar Abaya says, the moment that the witnesses sign that document of authorization, he has now taken possession, and already from that point in time, he has the fruits. Rava Amar Rava says, it's from the time of announcing the property, when those days are over, that's when he becomes the owner of the property, as Rashi will explain. And Rashi explains, from when does he get the fruits of the property? Misha shamalo bezin karka bechovo. If you have a person that bezin evaluated a piece of property, again, he's collecting it for his debt. At what point in time is he considered the owner, that he gets the fruits of that property? And Rashi continues, adrachta, the first opinion is when the creditor gets the adrachta, that's when he becomes the owner of the property. That's la'achar tishim yom, that's after 90 days, shenifsak adin, after the ruling was issued. De'amrin parakama, the bezin kosvin adrachta shtar, psak din, anichsei lova. We say that the bezin writes the shtar, which is called an adrachta, on the property of the borrower, shebechol mokom sheyimtzim, that wherever that property is, mishaloi kachim v'mosvim la'shtar, wherever it is, wherever he's able to find his property, he can take them, and they give him the shtar. Once they give him the shtar, he is now considered to be the owner. And then the second opinion was Eida b'chasumov, that the signatures, that cause him to be the owner. Miyom shenechtam shtar ha'adrachta bebezdin, from the day that the shtar ha'adrachta is signed in Bezdin, afal b'shalo baliyadu, even though it doesn't come into the possession, he hasn't yet gotten possession of the shtar, still he's considered to be the owner of the property, he gets the fruits of the property. And finally, the last opinion was the opinion of Rava Michishalmu Yemei. It's from when the days of announcing are over. What that means is as follows. Even though he has the adrachta, which is essentially the document of authorization allowing him to get this property, but what happened is he got the adrachta, but he wasn't able to find property of the lova until some time passed. And then what happens is as follows. Once he locates property of the borrower, he actually, the process is not over yet. He has to go to Bezin, and then they make an announcement. They essentially auction off the property, because if they auction off the property, someone buys it for a very high price, those funds are going to be used to pay the creditor. So they announce that they have this property to sell, like we say in Erchin. Now, if this person, this particular creditor, he decides he's going to pay more than whatever everybody else, he's going to pay the most of the auction because he wants the actual property. So then they give him the property after the days of announcing, essentially after the auction is over. In Meseches Erchin, it says how many days they actually do this announcement. Until those days are over, the fruits still belong to the borrower. Once that period is over, once the auction essentially is over, that's when the creditor takes the fruits. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Hasocher para mechaver, if somebody rents a cow from his friend, v'yeshila la'achar, and he lends the cow to somebody else, v'mesa, and then the cow dies in its normal fashion, and so the halacha generally is a renter would not be responsible for that kind of death. That's considered to be an accident. However, a borrower is considered to be responsible even for accidents. So what happens in this case is, Yishava hasocher shemesa kedarka, the renter swears that it died, essentially, that it died in its normal fashion, and it was an accident, that he doesn't owe any money. And then the borrower actually pays the socher, because the borrower really borrowed it from the socher, and the borrower is responsible for onsim, so he pays the renter. The Gemara says, Amar Rav Yossi says, Keitzad halo osa sechora b'paraso shel chaver. How does this guy make business out of the cow of his friend? It's not even the socher's cow, and now he's getting reimbursed the value of the cow from the shoel. Elatachzor par l'bailim. Rather, what happens is the cow returns to its original owner. Rashi explains, hasocher par mechaver, if somebody rents a cow from his friend, v'omad socher v'shila la'achar lasos bo yimes chiruso, and the renter goes ahead and lends it to somebody else, that person will use it. Yishava hasocher lamasker, the socher swears to the masker shemesa kedarka, that it died in its normal fashion, upater, and he's pater, shasocher eno chai ba'onsin, because the socher is not chai v'onsin, v'hashoel shu chai ba'onsin v'shalom l'socher, and again the shoel is chai v'onsin, he pays the socher. And the Gemara says, Amalei Ravidi bar Avin li Abaya, Ravidi bar Avin says to Abaya, Michti, let us see, Socher b'mai kani l'hai para. How did the renter acquire this cow? B'shvua, by taking the oath that it died by accident, he's no longer responsible, and so therefore he essentially becomes like the owner, so to speak, of the cow, and he gets paid back by the shoel, according to the Tanakama. But the Gemara says, V'neimale masker l'socher, but why can't the masker say to the socher, Dal ant v'dal shvuasech, let's remove you and remove your shvua. I don't even want you to take a shvua. V'anam mishtina dina b'hadei shoel, and I'm going to take my court case with the shoel against the shoel, and I should be the one to get paid back. And the Gemara says, Amar Lei said back to him, Misavrit socher b'shvuhu dekakani. Do you really think that the socher acquires the cow through the oath that he's taking? That's not true. Mishas misahu dekani. It's actually from the moment of the animal's death that he acquires. Ushvua kadei lahafis daido shel balabayas. The oath is only taken in order to calm, so to speak, the das of the balabayas. In order to appease the balabayas, he takes the shvua, but that's not what creates the kinyan. And so therefore, again, the socher is the one that gets to collect from the shoel. And Rashi explains, B'shvua shehu nishba lamasker. Again, he takes a shvu, an oath to the masker that it was an accident. And then we say, no, that's just lahafis daito, that's just to appease the masker. Shelo yomar pashata, but that the masker shouldn't think that there was some kind of negligence. But other than that, the true owner, so to speak, is actually the socher. And the Gemara continues, Amar Reb Zera says, Pa'amim sha'abayla mishalman kama paros l'socher. You can have a case where the owners would pay many paros, many cows to the socher, all for one cow. Hey chidami, what could be the case? The case could be as follows. Agra minei mea yomi. Let's say the socher rents the cow from the owner for 100 days. V'hadar shaili minei tishin yomi. But then the original owner actually borrows the cow back from the socher for 90 days. And hadar agra minei tamnan yomi. And then the renter, he rents it for 80 of those 90 days from the original owner. V'hadar shaili minei shavin yomi. And then the original owner borrows it back for 70 days. V'meisa besochi meishelt. And then it dies while the original owner is borrowing his own cow. He's essentially borrowed his own cow twice. And every single borrowing, he's going to be chayiv one cow. So you can have a situation where the original owner is actually chayiv to pay the renter multiple cows. And Rashi explains, sometimes the original person who rented it out, he's going to have to pay several cows for this one cow. According to what our Mishnah said, because you have some where it was entirely his, as we'll explain, and some that it's the days of the rental and then it's supposed to be returned. As Rashi now continues and explains, how so? Means as follows. Ruvain shesachar para mishimen sheyasa b'malacha meya yom. Ruvain rents a cow from Shimon, and he's going to do work with this cow for 100 days. V'chazar Shimon v'yamar lo. Now Shimon then says to him, Asei imi tova, do me a favor, v'shiloni osa tishim yom min hameya shesacharta, and lend that cow back to me for 90 of the days of the 100 days which you rented. In other words, he rented it for 100 days, but you're not actually going to use it for 100 days. You'll do me a favor, you'll lend me it, and I'm going to use it now for 90 of the 100 days that you rented it. Ulachar tishim achziran alach, and then I'm going to return it to you after 90 days. La'asos etzlacha yud yomim lahashlam hameya. Then you'll be able to work with it for 10 days, and that will be the completion of the 100 days. V'chein asan, that's exactly what happens. So yesh kan din mishnah seinu. So in this case, you have the halacha of our Mishnah. The shoel, who just happens to be the original owner, is now chayav to pay the socher. The Tanan, because we learned in our Mishnah, hasocher par mechaveiro, if he rents a cow from his friend, v'shilo liachar, and then he lends it to somebody else, b'sochi meischirusa, during the time that he's renting it, to mali bailam or mali achar. What difference does it make if he lends it to somebody else or lends it back to the original owner? In mesa eitzel shoel, if the animal dies by the borrower, hare socher pater b'shvua, the socher's pater, he's exempt because he just takes an oath that it was an accident. V'hashoel mishalim l'socher, and the borrower, of course, has to pay the renter. And Rashi continues, Chaza Ruvain, if Ruvain now comes along, Ruvain again is the one who originally rented the cow from Shimon, and then he lent it back to Shimon, who's the original owner. Now Ruvain comes, Uvo etzlo, he comes to Shimon, V'yamar lo haskirena li mitishim yom shishula b'yadcha mimeni, you are now borrowing this cow from me for 90 days, can you rent it to me part of that time? V'eshtavid bo shmonim yom, I'll be a renter for 80 of those days from you. V'tol secharcha, and he says he's going to pay the rent. Here, take your wages for these 80 days. V'chein asan, that's exactly what he does. So now he paid rent already for 100 days, but he gave it back for 90 of the days, and now he's renting it again for 80 of those 90 days. So now it's as though during the time that Shimon is borrowing it, because again Shimon is borrowing his own cow, it's as if he now rented it to somebody else. Because he is taking the rent, and the person renting it can use it for whatever he wants. Now in this situation, let's say it died while Reuven was renting it in this case, Reuven pater b'shvur, then Reuven would be pater because he would just take an oath. V'Shimon mishalim lo para achas, and Shimon would pay him one cow, sheshoal mimenu, because he did borrow a cow from him. V'uchayev b'onsonim, he's chayev in all kinds of accidents. Upara acheres, now the other thing is he'd actually have to give him another cow, lasos etzlo asara yamim, because he does own a cow for the 10 days, because there's also a 10-day original rental, lahashlam hameya, to complete the 100 days. And now Rashi continues, Chazar Shimon, now let's say Shimon goes ahead, V'shoal mimenu shivim yom min hashmonim shesachar mimenu. Let's say Shimon, who's the original owner, goes ahead and now borrows it for 70 days from the 80 days that he rented it. Al minas she'achzirena lo, again on the condition that he returns it to him, v'yasaba asara yomim lahashlam hashmonim shal schiras, and he'll get to use it for 10 days to complete the 80 days of the rental, shal schiras hasheni, of that second rental. V'im haisa mesa b'soch shivim yom halala, now if it dies during these 70 days, hareyesh kan din hasheni, kedin harishon, now we have the same law applies the second time as it did the first time, that he owes him a cow. V'yishava Ruvain shemesa kedarka, Ruvain swears that it died in its normal fashion, it's an accident. V'Shimon hashoel mishalim lo dalit paros, and now Shimon, the borrower, has to pay 4 cows. Shtayim nechlotos lo b'shvil shtei paros sheulos sheishilu Ruvain. Number 1, you have 2 cows that essentially he has to give to Ruvain, because Ruvain lent him 2 cows, which is really all the same cow, but 2 cows that now died. It's like they both died. Because the cow is not in front of us anymore. Which he originally lent. You can't say that that's been returned. He's paying him essentially money for the cow. And so he really has 2 claims against him. On 2 separate lendings. Now he also has 2 claims to finish up 2 rentals. Etzlo esrim yom, because he's owed 10 days of work from the cow. So there you have a situation of 4 cows, 2 of them which he's being completely paid as the owner, and then 2 more which are for 10 days each to complete the 20 days of rental. And the Gemara continues, Amar le Ravacha mi Difti le Ravina. Ravacha from Difti said to Ravina, Michti let us see. Chodapari, it's all one cow over here. Ayla v'afka, it's being brought in and being brought out, meaning afka mischiras v'ayla l'she'ela, it's being taken out of a rental and being brought into being borrowed. Afka mishe'ela, then it's being taken out of being borrowed, v'ayla l'schiras, and being brought in to being rented. And so therefore, why do you have to pay 2 cows over here when it's really all the same cow? Amar Lei said back to him, but the cow is no longer around. The cow has already died. The name of Lehachi, is the cow still around that you can say that? You can't say that. Therefore, each one is really just a payment for the cow, and he does owe him multiple cows. Mar Bar Ravashi, Amar Mar Bar Ravashi says, Ein lo alein ela shtei paros. It's not true. He can only collect 2 cows, which really just means 1 for the borrowing and 1 just to finish up the rental. Chada de she'ela, just 1 for the borrowing. V'chada de schiras, and then 1 just to finish up the days of the rental. Because shum she'ela achasi, v'shum schiras achasi. Because all borrowings are considered like 1, all rentals are considered like 1. The she'ela kani lagamri, what he's getting paid back for the one that was lent out, that one he gets completely. And the schiras avad ba yemei schirusa, for the rentals he should complete the days that he's renting it. Umahadr le lamar, and then he returns it to the owner. And Rashi explains, Michti let us see, Chada para havo, it's all 1 cow, Linyan tashlim inami, so to pay back as well, L'shalim le para achas, he should just have to pay him 1 cow, V'tamod b'mokam harishona tacha shtei hashelos, and it should count in place of the first one for both borrowings, V'teishalo, he'll be able to keep that cow, V'achas yimser lo lasos b'esrim yom, and just give him another cow to complete the 20 days of rental. And he said back, Misa lepara be'ena denei mahachi, the cow's not around anymore, you can't say that. Ilu haisa kayemes, if the cow was still around, haya pater lagamri, of course he'd be totally potter. It's just that the renter would be able to use it for 20 days. But now that the cow died, the renter is able to come to the borrower and say, you owe me money. It has to be a payment of money. The shoel has to pay the socher for 2 different claims. And Rashi continues, Mar Bar Ravashi is really saying the exact same thing as the original question of Ravacha Midifti, and he says, Shum she'el achasi, that all borrowings should be considered like 1. The kevan the chada para havoy, again the same argument as before. If it's all 1 cow, elashamach masocher sheishel hu ba'alav shnei she'elos para ba'alav shnei she'elos para achas einan ela achas. It's just that since it was again 2 times it happened that the socher lent it out, so he's trying to come 2 times for 1 cow, but it's really all 1 cow according to Mar Bar Ravashi. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah says, Po'amim sheshneim bechatas, there are times that they both bring a carbon chatas, and Rashi explains, Po'amim sheshneim bechatas hamasnis and kai, this statement is going on the Mishnah. Again, the case of the Mishnah is you have a renter, and then the renter lends it out to somebody else. So hasocher v'ashoel nishbul l'sheker, let's say you have a case where the renter and the borrower, they take an oath, and they both take false oaths, v'lo kifru mammon, but in those oaths, they aren't actually denying any money. V'harein b'shvuas bitoy, so that's called a shvuas bitoy, v'karban shalo chatas, and when you have a shvuas bitoy, essentially you take a false shvua, but you're not actually denying any money in that shvua, so the carbon is going to be a carbon chatas. This will all be explained in the Gemara in the next daf, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Lamed Vav Amud Aleph.